Indian billionaire pretends to be a laborer to test the love of a poor woman, but when he meets her parents, he is left speechless. Welcome to Billionaires and Hearts. Before we dive into today's emotional journey, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to stay updated. We'd love to hear your first impressions, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think as you watch. And if you enjoy our stories, please like and share this video with your friends. Now let's get started. Bharat Malhotra stood before the mirror in his luxurious Manhattan penthouse, methodically removing his designer watch and expensive jewelry. His reflection showed a man caught between two worlds, the sophisticated CEO of a global technology empire and his Indian heritage that still called to him through his parents, teachings about humility and true connection. He had everything money could buy, yet something was missing. His mother's words from their last video call echoed in his mind. "Beta, all your success means nothing without someone to share it with. But how will you know if someone loves you for who you are, not what you have?" Those words had planted a seed, one that had grown into an unconventional plan. He would shed his billionaire persona and pose as a simple laborer in his own company, working alongside the cleaning staff and maintenance crews, not to test his employees' efficiency as other CEOs had done, but to find something more meaningful, genuine connection. His friend Thomas Parker, the only person privy to his plan, thought he was crazy. "You're going to give up your comfortable life to scrub floors. For what? Love?" Thomas had scoffed when Bharat shared his intention. "Not give up," Bharat had corrected. "Just step away for a while. I need to know if I can be valued for myself, not my bank account." Now, as he exchanged his tailored suit for simple work clothes, Bharat felt a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. He had arranged everything meticulously: a fake identity, a modest apartment in Queens, and a position in the maintenance department of his own corporate building. For the next few months, he would be simply Bharat Kumar, a recent immigrant trying to build a life in America. What he didn't expect was to meet Priya Sharma on his very first day. She worked in the building's cafeteria, serving food with a smile that seemed to brighten the entire room. Unlike the countless socialites who had pursued him, Priya's beauty was unadorned, her charm natural and unstudied. "You're new here?" she asked as she served him lunch. Her accent carried the same hints of Mumbai that his parents did, a touch of home in this concrete jungle. "Yes," he replied, conscious of maintaining his pretense. "Just started today." "Welcome then," she smiled, adding an extra portion to his plate. "First day is always the hardest. You look like you could use the energy." That small act of kindness, offered without any knowledge of his true identity, touched something in Bharat. He found himself returning to the cafeteria each day, drawn not just by Priya's beauty, but by her genuine warmth and the way she treated everyone, from executives to janitors, with equal respect. What Bharat didn't realize was that his simple disguise was about to lead him into a situation far more complex than he had anticipated. As he watched Priya interact with others, he noticed something peculiar. She seemed to be carrying a burden, her smile occasionally faltering when she thought no one was watching. One evening, as he was finishing his shift, he saw her sitting alone in the empty cafeteria, staring at her phone with tears in her eyes. Without thinking, he approached her table. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his carefully maintained distance forgotten in the face of her distress. Priya quickly wiped her eyes, attempting to smile. "Oh, it's nothing. Just family matters." But it wasn't nothing, and as Bharat would soon discover, his little experiment in finding true love was about to become entangled with a story far more complicated than he could have imagined. A story that would test not just love, but his understanding of wealth, worth, and what truly matters in life. In the days that followed, Bharat found himself drawn deeper into Priya's world. Working as a maintenance man gave him unprecedented access to the building at all hours, and he often found reasons to linger near the cafeteria. He learned that Priya worked two jobs, serving food during the day and cleaning offices at night. The revelation made him uncomfortable. These were his buildings, his employees, yet he had never truly understood their lives. One night, as rain pounded against the windows of the empty office building, Bharat discovered Priya sleeping at one of the cafeteria tables, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. A stack of medical bills lay scattered beside her. His heart clenched at the sight. He could have solved her problems with a single check, but that would mean revealing his true identity. Instead, he gently woke her. "Priya, you should go home." "It's late." She startled awake, quickly gathering the papers. "Oh, Bharat, I'm sorry, I just needed to rest for a moment." Her hands trembled as she tried to organize the bills. "My mother," she began, then stopped, as if weighing whether to continue. "She's very ill, in India. The treatments are expensive, and my father—" She swallowed hard. "He lost everything trying to save our family business. Now it all falls on me." Bharat's chest tightened. How many similar stories had he missed while living in his penthouse bubble? "Can I help?" he offered, knowing he couldn't reveal the full extent of his capabilities. Priya managed a small smile. "You're kind, but unless you're secretly a millionaire—" She laughed softly at what she thought was an absurd joke, and Bharat felt the weight of his deception grow heavier. As weeks passed, Bharat and Priya grew closer. They shared lunch breaks, talking about their lives, his carefully constructed false narrative and her painfully honest reality. He learned that she had been a talented dancer in India, performing classical Bharatanatyam, but had given it up to work in America. She told him about her childhood in Mumbai, her mother's cooking, and her father's small jewelry store that had been in their family for generations. "Papa took a loan to expand the business," she explained one day. But then everything went wrong. The new location flooded during monsoon season, the insurance wouldn't cover it, and then Mama got sick. Her voice trailed off, and Bharat resisted the urge to reach for his phone and transfer enough money to solve all her problems. Instead, he listened, and in listening, he began to understand something profound about wealth and poverty, about struggle and dignity. Priya never complained about her situation. She worked hard, sent money home, and still found reasons to smile. One evening, as they walked together after their shifts, Priya stopped suddenly. "Why are you so interested in my problems, Bharat? Most people don't want to hear sad stories." The question caught him off guard. Because you're strong," he answered truthfully. "You face everything with grace. It's beautiful." In the streetlight's glow, he saw her blush. It was the first time he'd seen her react as a woman to a man, rather than as a colleague or friend. The moment hung between them, fragile and precious, but the moment was shattered by the ring of her phone. Her face fell as she answered it, speaking rapidly in Hindi. Bharat, understanding every word, heard her father's desperate voice on the other end. The family home was being threatened with foreclosure. Her mother needed surgery. They needed more money than Priya could possibly earn with her current jobs. After the call, Priya was silent for a long time. Then, without looking at him, she said, "I've been offered another job, better paying, at a gentleman's club." Bharat felt as if he'd been struck. "No," he said, more sharply than he intended. "Priya, you can't." "Can't?" Her eyes flashed. "What right do you have to tell me what I can't do? You don't know what it's like, watching your mother suffer because you can't send enough money. Knowing your father is about to lose everything he spent his life building." "There must be another way," Bharat insisted, his mind racing. He could fix this all so easily, but would she ever forgive him for his deception? "If you know another way for me to earn that much money quickly—" "I'm listening," she challenged. Bharat opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in his life, his wealth felt like a burden rather than a blessing. He watched helplessly as Priya walked away, her shoulders straight despite the weight she carried. That night, in his real apartment, the penthouse he returned to when no one was watching, Bharat paced restlessly. On his phone was a simple number, the total of Priya's family's needs. It was less than what he spent on a single business dinner, yet he knew that simply giving her the money would destroy something precious, her trust, her pride, perhaps even her growing feelings for him. As dawn broke over the city, Bharat made a decision. He would find a way to help Priya, but it had to be on terms that would preserve her dignity. What he didn't know was that his plan would soon be complicated by an unexpected arrival, one that would force him to confront the consequences of his deception sooner than he had planned. His friend Thomas arrived unannounced at his office the next morning, not realizing Bharat was supposed to be working as a maintenance man that day. "Your parents are flying in from Mumbai," Thomas announced without preamble. "They'll be here next week. Your mother says she's tired of waiting for you to find a bride. She's bringing potential matches." Bharat felt the carefully constructed walls of his double life begin to crumble. How could he continue his charade with his parents in town? How could he pursue his growing feelings for Priya while meeting with brides his mother had chosen? And most importantly, how could he help save her family without revealing who he really was? Looking out over the city from his office window, Bharat realized that his simple experiment in finding true love had evolved into something far more complicated. He was no longer just testing Priya's capacity for love. He was testing his own capacity for truth, courage, and sacrifice. What he didn't know was that Priya had secrets of her own, secrets that would soon force both of them to confront truths they weren't ready to face. As the sun rose higher over the city, casting long shadows across the office buildings where their story had begun, both Bharat and Priya were about to discover that the greatest test of love isn't about wealth or status. It's about having the courage to be truly honest with both yourself and the person you love. The morning Bharat's parents were due to arrive, he found himself in an impossible situation. Dressed in his maintenance uniform, he was mopping the lobby floors when he saw Priya rushing through the building's entrance, her eyes red from crying. Before he could reach her, another figure entered, his mother, elegant in her silk sari, arriving early and unannounced. His heart nearly stopped as his mother's path was about to intersect with Priya's. The two women who represented the different halves of his life were seconds away from meeting, while he stood frozen, mop in hand. At the last moment, Priya ducked into a service corridor, never noticing the elegant Indian woman who passed by. Bharat quickly retreated to the maintenance closet, his hands shaking as he pulled out his phone to text Thomas. Within minutes, Thomas had skillfully intercepted his mother, escorting her to a coffee shop with the excuse that Bharat was in an important meeting. But Priya's distress worried him more than his mother's unexpected arrival. He found her in the cafeteria kitchen, preparing for the day with mechanical movements that spoke of deep distraction. "What's wrong?" he asked, approaching her workstation. She jumped slightly, then tried to compose herself. "Nothing. Everything." She glanced around to ensure they were alone. "I went to that club last night, the one offering the job." Bharat's stomach clenched. "And I couldn't do it," she whispered. "I stood outside for an hour, but I couldn't walk in. Now I don't know what to do. The bank called this morning. They're going to take my parents and house by the end of the week if they don't receive payment." Without thinking, Bharat reached for her hand. "Listen to me. Don't go back to that club, promise me." "Then tell me what to do," her voice broke. "My mother's surgery is scheduled for next week. If they lose the house, they'll have nowhere to recover. Everything they've worked for their whole lives." At that moment, they were interrupted by the cafeteria manager. "Priya, table 3 needs clearing." She pulled away from Bharat, wiping her eyes. As she turned to leave, he caught her arm. "Meet me after work. I think I might have a solution." Throughout the day, Bharat's mind raced. He had formulated a plan, but its success depended on perfect timing and a bit of luck. He made several calls from the maintenance closet, speaking in hushed tones to his business associates. By evening, he had arranged everything. He waited for Priya outside the building, his heart pounding with both anticipation and fear. She appeared, looking exhausted but somehow still beautiful in the fading light. "I heard about a job," he began carefully. "A corporate office is looking for a cultural liaison to handle their Indian accounts. The pay is significantly better than what you're making now." Priya's eyes narrowed. "And you just happened to hear about this. Why would they hire me?" "Because you're perfect for it," he said truthfully. "You're educated. You understand both cultures. You're hard-working." He hesitated. "The interview is tomorrow morning. I've arranged for you to meet with them." "Bharat, what aren't you telling me? How did you arrange this?" Before he could answer, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing an elegant older woman in the back seat, his mother. "Beta," she called out, her eyes wide with surprise. "What are you doing here dressed like that?" Priya looked between Bharat and his mother, confusion evident on her face. "Beta," she repeated softly. The carefully constructed walls of his deception came crashing down in that single moment. His mother's driver had gotten the pickup location wrong, arriving at the office building instead of his penthouse. "I can explain," he started, but Priya was already backing away from him, her face a mask of hurt and betrayal. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Priya, please." "Who are you?" This time her voice was stronger, angry. His mother was getting out of the car now, her expression bewildered as she took in the scene before her. "Bharat, what is going on? Why are you dressed as a worker?" Priya's eyes grew wide at the confirmation. "Bharat, not Kumar, but Malhotra, the owner." She pressed her hands to her mouth. "All this time, you were laughing at me." "No, it wasn't like that. I wanted to find someone who could love me for myself, not my money." "Love you?" Priya's laugh was bitter. "While I told you about my struggles, my family's problems, you could have helped at any time. Instead, you turned it into some kind of game." His mother was looking between them with growing understanding. "Beta, what have you done?" But Priya wasn't waiting for explanations. She turned and ran, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Bharat moved to follow her, but his mother caught his arm. "Let her go," she said softly. "Some things need time." Back in his penthouse, Bharat faced his mother's questioning. He told her everything about his experiment, about Priya, about her family's struggles. To his surprise, his mother listened without judgment. "You have your father's romantic heart," she said finally. "But you have much to learn about love. Real love isn't about tests or games, it's about trust." "I've ruined everything," he admitted. "Perhaps," his mother said, "or perhaps this is where the real story begins. Tomorrow, more potential brides will arrive. Your father will expect you to meet them." Bharat looked out over the city lights, thinking of Priya somewhere out there, probably crying, probably hating him. "I can't meet them. The only woman I want to marry is the one I've hurt the worst." His mother smiled slightly. "Then you'd better find a way to make things right, not with your money, Beta, with your heart." What Bharat didn't know was that, at that very moment, Priya was making a decision that would change both their lives forever. Sitting in her tiny apartment, surrounded by bills and tears, she was holding a plane ticket to India, and a letter that would force both of them to confront the true meaning of love, trust, and forgiveness. The next morning would bring challenges neither of them were prepared for, as the consequences of deception and the price of truth would come due. The simple love story that began in a corporate cafeteria was about to become a test of character that would strip away every pretense, leaving only the raw truth of who they really were and who they could become together. The morning after the revelation, Priya didn't come to work. Her absence in the cafeteria felt like a physical ache to Bharat, who had arrived early, still dressed in his maintenance uniform. He stood in the cafeteria, watching other workers set up for the day, feeling more lost than he ever had in his life. His phone buzzed, another message from his father about meeting the potential brides. He ignored it, just as he'd ignored the previous dozen messages. Instead, he found himself walking to Priya's apartment building in Queens, a place he'd never visited, but knew the address of from her employee records. The building was modest but well-maintained, with small potted plants lining the entrance. He climbed the stairs to her floor, his heart pounding with each step. But when he knocked on her door, there was no answer. "She left early this morning," a voice said behind him. An elderly Indian woman stood in the doorway of the neighboring apartment, watching him with curious eyes, carrying a suitcase. Poor thing was crying. Bharat felt his world tilt on its axis. "Did she say where she was going?" The woman shook her head. "But she left this for the landlord." She held out an envelope. "I'm supposed to give it to him later, but you seem concerned about her." With trembling hands, Bharat took the envelope. Inside was a month's rent and a note surrendering the apartment. She was really leaving. Racing back to his office, Bharat made call after call. Finally, he found what he was looking for. She had booked a flight to Mumbai that departed in 3 hours. In his office, Thomas watched as Bharat paced frantically. "You could just let her go," he suggested. "There are other women from good families with connections." Bharat stopped pacing. "You don't understand, she is different. When I was pretending to be poor, she shared her lunch with me, even though she barely had enough for herself. She worked 2 jobs without complaining, sent money home to her family, and still found reasons to smile. She has more dignity and strength than anyone I've ever met." "Then why did you lie to her?" The question hit Bharat like a physical blow. "Because I was a fool. I thought I was testing her, but really I was the one being tested, and I failed." His mother entered the office, elegant as always. "Beta, the first family has arrived. They're waiting in the conference room." "I can't meet them, Ma. I have to go after Priya." "And say what?" his mother challenged. "That you're sorry for deceiving her? That your wealth can solve all her problems? You think that will make her trust you?" Bharat sank into a chair. "Then what should I do?" His mother's face softened. "First, you must understand why you really deceived her. Was it truly to find genuine love? Or was it because you were afraid?" "Afraid? Afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of showing your true self, not just your wealth or lack of it, but who you really are inside." As Bharat absorbed his mother's words, his phone rang. It was the elderly neighbor from Priya's building again. "She left something else," the woman said. "A letter. It fell behind the radiator. I think you should read it." Bharat rushed back to Queens. The letter was addressed to her parents, never meant for his eyes. But as he read it, his heart broke and swelled simultaneously. "Dearest Mama and Papa," Priya had written, "I'm coming home, not because I've failed, but because I've learned something important. We've always measured success in money, having it or not having it, but I've learned that true wealth lies in being honest about who you are and what you believe in. I fell in love with a man who turned out to be a lie, but I won't let that make me bitter. Instead, I'll take the lesson that no amount of money is worth losing your self-respect." The letter continued, but Bharat couldn't read more through his tears. He checked his watch. There was still time before her flight, but his mother's words echoed in his mind. What could he say to make this right? Then he remembered something Priya had told him weeks ago, during one of their lunch breaks. She'd mentioned a small temple near her parents' house in Mumbai where she used to dance Bharatanatyam. "It was nothing fancy," she'd said, "but when I danced there I felt pure, like nothing else mattered except the truth in the movement." In that moment, Bharat knew what he had to do. He pulled out his phone, not to book a flight to Mumbai, but to make a different call entirely. His plan would either win back Priya's trust or lose her forever, but either way, it would be the truth. What he didn't know was that Priya was sitting in the airport, holding a second letter, one that would change everything. As she read it, her hands trembled, and the choice before her became both clearer and more impossible. The next few hours would test them both in ways they never expected, as the true meaning of wealth, love, and honesty would be revealed in the most unexpected of places. And it would all begin with a simple question: what is the price of truth, and who ultimately pays it? The letter in Priya's hands shook as she read it again, sitting in the airport terminal. It was from her mother, but not the desperate plea for help she'd been expecting. Instead, its contents made her question everything she thought she knew about love, pride, and forgiveness. "My dearest daughter," her mother wrote, "before you make any decisions, there's something you must know. Years ago, when your father's jewelry store was just beginning, a young man came to buy a wedding set. He couldn't afford much, but the love in his eyes when he spoke of his bride-to-be moved me. I convinced your father to sell him our finest pieces at a fraction of their worth. That man was Bharat Malhotra's father." Priya's breath caught. The letter continued. "He never forgot that kindness. When he learned of our struggles through business circles, he tried to help anonymously. But your father's pride made him refuse any direct assistance. Now I'm breaking my silence because I see history repeating itself. Pride and love are dancing together again, my child. The question is, which one will lead?" Meanwhile, Bharat had set his plan in motion. He wasn't chasing after Priya. That would have been too easy, too predictable, too much like throwing money at a problem until it went away. Instead, he went to the small temple near her parents' home in Mumbai, not physically, but through a video call with the temple's caretaker. "Sir, this is most unusual," the elderly priest said, peering into the camera. "You want to do what?" "I want to sponsor a complete renovation of the dance area," Bharat explained, "not to make it modern or fancy, but to restore it to its original beauty. The place where a young girl once found her truth through dance." The priest's eyes softened with understanding. "Ah, you speak of Priya. She was our finest dancer. Such grace, such devotion. We've missed her these many years. I'm not doing this to impress her," Bharat continued. "I want to do it because it's right. Because some places in this world must be preserved for their truth, not their profit." As he spoke these words, Bharat finally understood what his mother had been trying to tell him. His deception hadn't just been about testing Priya's love, it had been about hiding from his own truth. Back at the airport, Priya stood at the gate, her mother's letter clutched in her hand. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. In that moment, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It contained a video link. Her finger hesitated over the play button. The practical part of her mind said to ignore it, to board the plane, to leave this complicated situation behind. But her heart made her press play. The video showed the small temple where she had danced as a girl. The camera panned across the worn stone floors, the simple altar, the space where she had found such joy in movement. Then it shifted to show Bharat, not in his expensive suit or his maintenance uniform, but in simple clothes, looking directly into the camera. "Priya," he began, "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to tell you a truth. When I pretended to be poor, I thought I was being clever, trying to find someone who would love me for myself. But I was wrong. I wasn't being myself at all. I was still hiding." He walked through the temple as he spoke. "This place. You told me once that when you danced here you felt pure, that nothing mattered except the truth in the movement. I never understood what you meant until now." The camera followed him to the dance area. "I'm not going to tell you that money doesn't matter. We both know it does. It can solve problems, ease burdens, make life more comfortable, but it can't create trust, it can't generate respect, and it certainly can't buy love." He touched one of the worn pillars gently. "I'm restoring this temple, not to impress you, but because places of truth should be preserved. I'm also creating a foundation to help small business owners in this area, not because I'm trying to fix your family's problems, but because it's the right thing to do. These decisions have nothing to do with winning you back, and everything to do with finally being honest about who I am and what I believe in." The video ended with a simple statement. "I am Bharat Malhotra. I am a wealthy man who forgot the value of truth. I am someone who needs to learn that love isn't about testing others. It's about testing yourself. And I am someone who, pretending to be poor, found the richest heart I've ever known." Priya stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. The final boarding call blared again. She looked at her boarding pass, then at her mother's letter, then at the phone still showing the paused video. What happened next would determine not just her future or Bharat's, but would answer a question as old as love itself. When truth and pride dance together, which one leads? The answer was waiting in the most unexpected place, and it would change everything. The final boarding call faded into silence as Priya made her decision. With trembling fingers, she dialed a number she had memorized but never used, Bharat's real number, listed on the company directory she had access to as an employee. But it was his mother who answered. "Namaste. Beta," the older woman said softly, as if she had been expecting the call. "He's not here right now. I need to tell him something," Priya managed. "Then come tell him yourself. He's where he's been every day since you left, in the cafeteria at your old station, waiting." Priya's heart clenched. "But my flight." "Some journeys are more important than others," Bharat's mother said wisely. "You know which one matters most." The taxi ride back to the corporate building felt both endless and too short. Priya clutched her mother's letter, her small suitcase still with her. The driver kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, probably wondering why his passenger was alternating between tears and smiles. When she walked into the cafeteria, she saw him immediately. Bharat sat at the same table where they had shared so many lunches, still wearing his maintenance uniform. He was holding something in his hands. She recognized it as one of the cheap paper flowers she used to make to decorate the cafeteria tables. He looked up as she approached, his eyes filling with hope and fear in equal measure. But before either of them could speak, another voice cut through the moment. "Beta, there you are." Bharat's father strode into the cafeteria, followed by several well-dressed people, clearly the potential brides and their families he was supposed to be meeting. "What is the meaning of this? Why are you dressed like this?" "The Sharma family has been waiting for hours." Bharat stood, still holding the paper flower. "Papa, I need to tell you a story about a young man who once bought wedding jewelry he could barely afford." His father stopped short, recognition dawning on his face. "And about how the kindness shown to him that day taught him the true meaning of wealth," Bharat continued. "A lesson he passed on to his son, but one his son had to learn again the hard way." Priya stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear. "It was my mother who sold you that jewelry, wasn't it? She saw love in your eyes and knew it was worth more than gold." The elegant families waiting by the door murmured in confusion, but Bharat's father's expression had transformed. He looked at Priya with new eyes, then at his son, understanding blooming across his features. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "wealth shows itself in the most unexpected ways." He turned to the waiting families. "I apologize, but I believe my son's heart has already chosen its path." But Priya wasn't finished. She pulled out her mother's letter. "Before anyone chooses any paths, there's something you need to know about pride and how it can blind us to love." She read the letter aloud, about how Bharat's father had tried to help her family anonymously, about her own father's pride that made him refuse, about the cycle of love and pride that seemed destined to repeat itself. "I was angry when I discovered your deception," she said to Bharat, "but I was wearing a mask too, the mask of someone too proud to accept help, too afraid to admit that sometimes love means letting someone care for you." Bharat took a step toward her. "I thought I was testing you, but you were teaching me. Every day, with every smile you gave, every kindness you showed, you were teaching me what real wealth looks like." "And you," she replied, "taught me that sometimes the richest heart hides behind the simplest facade." They stood there in the cafeteria where their story had begun, surrounded by the remnants of their deceptions and the promise of new truths. But there was still one more revelation to come, one that would test them both in ways they never expected. Bharat's mother stepped forward, holding a small package wrapped in aged silk. "There's something else you should see," she said, carefully unwrapping the fabric to reveal a familiar set of wedding jewelry, the very set Bharat's father had bought all those years ago. "I've kept these all these years," she said, waiting for the right moment, for the day when love and truth would dance together in perfect harmony. The significance of the moment wasn't lost on anyone present. The jewelry represented not just a connection between their families' pasts, but a bridge to their future. However, the greatest test still lay ahead, one that would require both Bharat and Priya to confront their final truths and decide what they valued most. As they stood there, surrounded by witnesses to their unconventional love story, both knew that the next few moments would determine everything. The question wasn't just whether love could overcome pride or truth could heal deception. It was whether two people, having seen each other at their most vulnerable, could find the courage to be their most authentic selves. In the quiet of the cafeteria, surrounded by the echoes of their shared past, Bharat and Priya faced each other with new understanding. The wedding jewelry in his mother's hands glinted under the fluorescent lights, a bridge between past and present, between pride and love. "Before we move forward," Priya said softly, "there's something you need to see." She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn notebook. "This is my dance journal from the temple. I've carried it with me every day since leaving India." She opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with graceful sketches and handwritten notes. "Each dance tells a story," she explained, "about gods and mortals, about triumph and defeat, about love and sacrifice. But the most important story it tells is about truth." Turning to a specific page, she showed him a sketch of a dancer with her arms raised to the heavens. "This pose represents surrender, not to another person but to truth itself. When I danced, this was always the hardest pose to maintain, because true surrender requires absolute honesty with yourself. Bharat looked at the sketch, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's why you couldn't accept help before. Even when you needed it desperately, you hadn't surrendered to your own truth. And you, she said gently, couldn't reveal your true self because you hadn't surrendered to yours. His father stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the notebook. May I? He asked, reaching for it. As he turned the pages, his expression softened. I remember watching my mother dance like this before we moved to America. She always said that wealth without grace was like a temple without prayers, empty. Bharat's mother still held the wedding jewelry, but now she was looking at her son with new eyes. Beta, all this time we've been pushing you to find a suitable match, thinking only of status and connections. But true suitability isn't about matching bank accounts, it's about matching souls. The potential brides and their families had long since departed, leaving only those who were meant to witness this moment. The cafeteria staff, who had known Priya as their hard-working colleague, watched from a respectful distance, understanding that they were seeing something rare and precious unfold. Bharat took a deep breath. Priya, when I first started this deception, I thought I was looking for someone who could love me despite my wealth. But what I really needed was someone who could teach me that true wealth has nothing to do with money. He reached for the paper flower he had been holding, one of her simple creations that had brightened so many people's days. You made these from napkins and discarded paper, turning something worthless into something beautiful. That's what you did for me too. You took my worthless deception and turned it into a chance for real love. Priya touched the flower gently. And you showed me that sometimes accepting help isn't a surrender of pride, but an acceptance of love. She turned to his parents. Your son came to my station every day, ate the simple food I served, and treated me with respect not because he was pretending to be poor, but because that's who he truly is. Bharat's mother stepped forward, still holding the wedding jewelry. Then perhaps these should finally serve their true purpose, she said, holding them out to Priya. Not as a symbol of wealth, but as a reminder that love, when it's real, always finds its way home. But Priya didn't reach for them immediately. Instead, she turned to Bharat. Before I accept these, I need to know one thing. The foundation you're creating to help small businesses, the temple restoration, would you have done these things if you hadn't met me? Bharat considered her question carefully. No, he answered honestly. I needed you to remind me of what my father learned long ago, that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in what we give. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give is our honest self. She smiled then, a smile that lit up her entire face. Then I have something to give you too. She stepped back, and to everyone's surprise, took the classical dance pose from her journal, arms raised in surrender, but her posture strong and proud. This is me, she said simply. I'm not just the cafeteria worker, not just the dutiful daughter, but all of me. The dancer who found her truth in a small temple, the woman who worked 2 jobs without shame, the person who fell in love with a man who proved that honesty, once found, is the greatest wealth of all. Bharat moved to stand before her, understanding the gift she was offering, her complete, unvarnished truth. In response, he removed his maintenance uniform jacket, standing in his simple shirt, no longer hiding behind any facade. And this is me, he said, not the CEO, not the pretend worker, but just a man who learned that love isn't about testing others. It's about being brave enough to face yourself. His mother stepped forward one last time, the jewelry now a bridge between past and future. As Priya finally accepted them, the metals warm from being held so long, she understood that she was accepting not just the jewelry, but the legacy of love they represented, a love that had taught 2 generations the true meaning of wealth. In the end, it wasn't in a grand ballroom or a luxurious mansion that their story found its resolution, but in the simple cafeteria where it had begun, where a woman had made paper flowers to brighten others' days, where a man had learned that true character shows itself in how you treat those who can offer you nothing, and where 2 hearts had found their way to honesty through the winding paths of deception. As they left the cafeteria that evening, Bharat and Priya walked together, neither pretending anymore. Both finally understanding that the greatest test of love isn't about wealth or status or even honesty. It's about having the courage to surrender to your truth and the wisdom to recognize it in another. The paper flower, still in Bharat's hand, would find a place of honor in their home. A reminder that beauty can be found in the simplest things, that wealth can be measured in moments of grace, and that love, when it's real, doesn't need to be tested. It simply needs to be true. And in the small temple in Mumbai, where a young girl had once found her truth through dance, a new generation would learn that some things are beyond price: the courage to be honest, the grace to accept love, and the wisdom to know that the richest heart is the one that remains true to itself. Thank you for watching this heart-stirring story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought of the story. Also, click on the video appearing on your screen to continue the journey with us. See you in the next story.